Stemming from the restless commerce and industrialization of a young nation, they came west in search of wealth. They came and they built a nation. Buffalo hide brought them to the plains, beaver pelts to the mountains, trade and commerce to Santa Fe. They came from Independence, St. Joseph, and Westport, across the Kansas Territory through Council Grove, past Pawnee Rock. They crossed the Arkansas, the Cimarron, the Canadian, the Purgatory. They moved west to Santa Fe. But before the many came the few. In southern Colorado, William and Charles Bent and their partner, Saran St. Vrain, met head-on the challenge of frontier commerce. During the 1830s, Fort William, referred to as Bent's Fort by traders and trappers, rose on the plains in view of the Spanish peaks to the southwest. By 1845, their trading empire extended from southern Wyoming into Mexico, west into the Rockies, and east to mid-Kansas. By 1960, all that was left was an adobe outline upon the ground. The challenge to build now passed to the archaeologists, historians, and the architects of the National Park Service. For theirs was the task of rebuilding that which would stand as a monument to the building of a nation. Consulted were historical accounts and detailed drawings of the fort by Lieutenant James Hebert, a topographical mapper who visited the fort in 1845 and 46, as were the diaries and notes of Susan McGoffin and William Hogue, who lived and worked at the fort. Archaeological digs during the 1960s, under the supervision of Jackson Moore, yielded architectural and building information, as well as cultural remains, which hinted at the nature and quality of life at the fort. Where evidence conflicted on detailed points of the fort's design, clarification was sought by examination of existing adobe structures in the Southwest, which date back to the 1830s and 40s. Through all this extensive research, information was constantly sifted and distilled into a final architectural concept. Care was given to every detail. Scale drawings were produced, as were freely drawn sketches of segments of the fort's design. Years of study, research, and planning now yielded to the architect's pen, and the idea was given shape. Not only were architectural plans and interior design of great concern, but planners had to look to clay, wood, and iron under the blacksmith's fire, for these were the basic elements from which the fort took shape. Adobe, clay, sand, and water were blended in a 30 by 50 foot concrete pit, enough mud to make 4,000 blocks a day. In order to speed the production of the traditional adobe blocks needed in the reconstruction, this machine had to be specially designed and hand-built. 160,000 blocks, measuring 4 by 9 by 18 inches, were used in the reconstruction. During the original construction, over 100 Mexican laborers made mud block, a task that took over 3 years. While machinery speeded up the traditional methods, there were still the slow jobs of hand trimming each block and setting the blocks on end for even drying. The rubble caused by breakage and uneven drying had to be scraped away and the ground prepared for subsequent runs. But before the blocks could take the form of walls, the architectural plans, drawn to scale, had to be transferred to the ground. It was upon this grid, surveyed on the construction site, that the fort took its final form, and the task was begun. Although adobe is traditionally laid directly upon the ground, erosion by rain splash and seepage of groundwater would have soon undermined the basic structure. To retard this action, a concrete foundation was used throughout the fort. The floors, a multi-layer design, conceived to prevent moisture damage, consisted of foam, sand, reinforced concrete, and a radiant heating system. Many modern features were adapted for durability and safety into the fort's design, but hidden so they would not intrude upon historic accuracy. The walls of the fort, some reaching 18 feet high, were actually 2 walls, an interior one of stabilized adobe, which contained 6% cement, and an exterior one of regular adobe block. This double wall system added additional strength to the overall design. Throughout the construction, care was given to the quality and authenticity of the craftsmanship, which was to duplicate as nearly as possible the handcrafted techniques of the 1830s and 40s. While walls took shape, hand-adz door jambs, windows and stairs were shaped and set into place. By the summer of 1975, the fort began to take recognizable shape. Upon the first level walls, cottonwood logs, known in Spanish as vigas, were set into place. 800 trees were cut and trimmed in readiness for use at the fort, but the preparation was long. Archaeological evidence had to be analyzed to determine wood types used in the original fort. Once the cottonwoods and pines were identified, a ready supply had to be found. The trees were then felled, cut to specific lengths, trimmed of bark, and while still green, sun-dried for 3 to 8 months in the traditional method of the Spanish Southwest. After the initial preparation, the logs were shaped, positioned, and cemented into place. Poles of ponderosa pine were treated in a similar fashion. Bark was removed by draw knives from 212,000 linear feet of pole, and then the poles were stacked, teepee fashion, to dry in the sun. Placed over the vigas at right angles, the poles known as latillas formed the roof and the framing upon which the second floor was constructed. But not all the wood was used for vigas and latillas. Cut to varying dimensions, the wood was fashioned into doors, windows, and stairs, each individually handcrafted to meet the exacting requirements of historical authenticity. Craftsmen schooled in generations of traditional workmanship were brought by the National Park Service from Taos, New Mexico, to oversee the adobe and wood construction. Men who knew from experience the workability of design. It was because of their judgment, in keeping with knowledge passed down from their ancestors, that design would often be altered to a more practical plan. Such craftsmen built 8 heavily timbered gates for the main entrances to the fort. Each door weighing approximately 600 pounds, required precision construction to ensure overall strength. Indispensable to construction and to the life of the fort is iron. In 1846, Lieutenant Hebert wrote that the ring of the blacksmith's hammer and the noise from the wagoners' shops were incessant. In the reconstructed Bent's Fort, the blacksmith's shop has been reopened and refurnished. The bellows were made on the site. The tools, the anvil, the hammers, fashioned for the new fort, hardware needed in its reconstruction. Full-time blacksmiths produced chain links, hinges, latches, and lanterns. Several hundred items were handmade for the reconstruction. Construction continued throughout the winter of 1975. As the Blue Northers came, the workers moved indoors to plaster and cover the radiant heating system with hard-packed adobe, which formed the traditional floor. Spring revealed the havoc a harsh winter could bring to adobe walls. Southern Colorado is essentially dry, but its harsh winters and violent thunderstorms quickly erode exterior walls. While precautions were taken to minimize erosion, planners realized that repairs to exterior walls would have to be frequent. As spring turned to early summer, the main gate was hung and sheathed in metal, and the architectural plans have been realized. Clay, wood, and iron under the blacksmith's fire. These were the basic elements. 130 years ago, Bent's Fort opened its doors to the Cheyenne, the Kiowa, the Arapaho, Ute, and Comanche. They opened to trading caravans and trappers. They opened to soldiers. The fort helped shape an empire. After years of research and planning, a year of labor, the task of rebuilding is finished. Every detail, every aspect was carefully researched and executed to ensure that many generations of the future will come here and feel the vestiges of our past.